Welcome back to the Colts Brawl podcast. I am your host, Michael Terrazas, joined by me again, my pal, Cody Felger. We got a great podcast in store for you guys today. Man, it's already the second episode, second of many. So, Cody, how you feeling, man?
Hey, I've been better, but I'm here and I'm excited to talk more Colts. Like you said, it's crazy, man. It's been a week, and now we're moving on to episode 2, and there's certainly a lot to talk about. So I'm excited to jump in today.
I mean, dude, there is a lot to talk about, man. I mean, I guess the first one, which is there was a report, if you want to call it that, last week about Phillip Rivers going to the Colts. What? Because the Colts fan base seems to be torn about this. Some of them don't want him. Some of them want him. Some of them say it makes sense. Some of them say it doesn't make sense. So what are your thoughts on it so far? It's mid-February right now. We still got like under a month to go. But right now, where are you standing with Phillip Rivers right now?
Yeah, and again, it is mid-February, so there's lots of rumors, lots of stuff. But one thing that I thought was interesting was it wasn't, when the reports came out, it wasn't really just a lot of, you see that sometimes on social media, on Twitter, some guys who kind of make up some news, make up some rumors and whatnot. It wasn't, it was actually some former teammates. I believe Melvin Gordon came out and said he believes that Rivers would go to the Colts, would be the best fit. So it's kind of crazy, like, seeing some people who, okay, like that actually maybe carries a little bit more weight than normal. And so that was just interesting. But anyway, going to your question, it was interesting because Derek, my co-host on the other podcast, and I did a thing, I believe it was either last week or the week before, on Phillip Rivers, and kind of the pros and the cons of whether we thought Rivers would be a good fit in Indy. And there are a lot of pros and there are a lot of cons. I would say there's probably more cons than pros. And the biggest one, obviously, is age. I mean, Rivers is getting closer to 40. I believe he's going to turn 39 in December. So he's really getting up there in age. We saw, some regression last year as far as stats are concerned. Maybe not so much in the passing yards and the downfield throws and all that, but as far as decision making, as far as turnovers, turning the ball over. I mean, Rivers had double 20 interceptions and only, I believe, like 23 touchdowns, and so not a great touchdown to interception ratio at all. And I would say, if just looking at from last year and even going into this year, I would argue that as it stands right now, the Chargers probably have more of a better supporting cast as far as skilled positions in the Colts boast right now. So how would that factor in? And then, there's pros and cons to this. Obviously the Chargers were, top 10 in passing yards. So that's definitely something that the Colts would like to improve in. They would like to be up there in top 10 because I believe they were in the bottom tier as far as passing yards are concerned. And so, there's just a lot of things to consider. And, obviously that leadership that Rivers brings. But, you'd probably only bring him in for 1 to 2 years. And then also, you think of, is this just a Band-Aid solution? If you do bring in Rivers to the Colts, then think that they can push it back another year. I personally am of the belief that they shouldn't. Regardless of if you bring in a Rivers, you bring in an older quarterback, whoever it is, you have to draft a quarterback there at 13 or you have to trade up. And that's just kind of what I think. But, as far as Rivers is concerned, I think that if, with the contingent that you do draft a guy, say Jordan Love, one Justin Herbert, one of those guys there at 13, or you trade up and go get a Tua or somebody like that. Whatever you do, I would not be opposed to bringing in Rivers with the idea that, okay, he's not just a band-aid solution, but he's a veteran, and he can help teach your and groom your young quarterback. That would be the reason why I would bring in Rivers. If you just bring in Rivers and not draft a quarterback, I would probably not be a fan of that. But that's just my take on it.
Yeah, man, you said some pretty good points. The Colts are bottom two, three in the league in downfield passing. I mean, Jacoby Brissett, 2,300 yards, I believe it was on the year. With Philip Rivers, I mean, when you look at the yards, 4,615 yards, you say, that's pretty good. That's going to get you places. But when you look at the 23 touchdowns to 20 interceptions, his QBR was 48.6. That's 22nd in the league. That's bad, man. That is not winning football because, when people look at the quarterback position, they always want to look at stats. And right here, his stat line says that he's not afraid to air the ball out, but it
Right.
also says that he puts his team in a horrible situation. Horrible situation. The same could be said with Jameis Winston. Um,
Yeah.
and you brought up a good point with Melvin Gordon because that's not just any reporter. That's his teammate that he has a phone number with. They communicate with each other. They're friends with each other. So that's good insight right there. With Philip Rivers, I would take him only on a 1-year deal, not even on a
Mhm.
2-year deal. A 2-year deal is that's just money going onto our books in 2021. I just wouldn't want that. Just a 1-year deal would be good for me. But other than that, Philip Rivers to the Colts, man, it's starting to pick up a little bit more heat. In the next 2 weeks, we should probably start hearing a lot more stuff considering free agents. But on Philip Rivers, man, that's just where we stand. I don't. It makes somewhat sense to me, but if I'm Chris Ballard, I probably just don't even. I probably don't even give him a call. I don't even call this agent at all.
Mm.
Uh, so, speaking of quarterback positions, man, you're looking at some ways the Colts can use their money or save their money.
Right.
And I was looking on Bleacher Report on a couple of other different sites, and they're naming Jacoby Brissett, our very own Jacoby Brissett, as a potential cut candidate. With me, I probably wouldn't go that route because I would probably elect to try and trade him because for the quarterback market these days, everybody's making 30 million. Everyone's making 35 million. But with Jacoby Brissett, he's on a 15. He's going to be making what, like 15 or 14 million dollars next year. I mean, that's a bargain for the quarterback position. But given this season's, tape, who's going to take him, you can you can make an argument if someone's desperate. I mean, you never know with these things, but Jacoby Brissett as a potential cut candidate, I wouldn't be mad about it.
Hmm.
Me personally, I wouldn't.
Yeah. And certainly you another quarterback you have to make sure that you cut is Brian Hoyer because you saved $3 million when you cut Hoyer this offseason,
Yep.
before June 1st. And so, but no, I was kind of looking at like what would happen if you cut Jacoby Brissett. So if the Colts cut Brissett before June 1st, they'd have $12.5 million in dead cap, but they'd also save $8.875 million. So they would save a decent amount there. But if he's traded before June 1st, the Colts would have a dead cap of only $5.5 million, but they would save $15.875 million. So I definitely would say you definitely would want to try to trade Jacoby Brissett. I don't really know how much you could get out of Brissett now, especially seeing him after, kind of the tale of two seasons in 2019 and kind of seeing how he struggled there at the end. I don't know how much you could get for him, but the only way that I could see the Colts really trading Brissett is if you bring in a veteran. Say you bring in a Rivers, you bring in one of those guys, because then and then you draft a rookie as well. Because let's be real, you're not going to have three quarterbacks who will probably be making decent amount of money on the roster at the same time. And so I would say that would probably be the reason why I would trade Brissett. But I mean, if the Colts even want to go that route, they could definitely save a lot more money by trading Brissett as opposed to just outright cutting him. So I would definitely try to do that if I was the Colts, especially if you've seen what you want out of Brissett. But I think the Colts like Brissett, so I could see them keeping him around. I could see them keeping him kind of at that mentor type thing. Maybe start a few games while you groom that rookie, and then maybe give way to that rookie sometime in 2020 season or
Yeah.
however you want to do it. Because the Colts did, just re-sign Brissett to a couple-year deal, and so they have him under contract for a while, and so it would make sense for me if they didn't go the veteran quarterback way and they just drafted a quarterback, and so I could see them doing that for sure. But yeah, I would certainly try to trade him before you cut him for sure.
Yeah, man. I mean, I'm with you on Brian Hoyer. Hell, I would have cut him after that Miami Dolphins game because
Oh,
that was
that
just
was
the worst.
awful.
That was the worst game of his career. That I even remember when Brian Hoyer first came onto the scene as a third string quarterback with the Cleveland Browns, and they just had their two quarterbacks go down, and he actually went, I think it was 3-0 in his first three starts. Then he tore his ACL. Oh my gosh! Do you remember in August when Brian Hoyer was the hottest free agent on the market?
Yeah, I do. And that was right, obviously, when the whole thing happened with Luck. And so
Yep.
I remember Chris Ballard said he felt fortunate to bring in Hoyer, but certainly you didn't think that he would be starting games for you at all in 2019. And so it makes sense, especially if you want to get younger at the quarterback position, especially if you want to, draft a guy and just get better. There's really no need for Hoyer, and we saw that in that Miami game. It was just, man, I was at that game. That was like the one game I could go to this last year, and it was just miserable. He couldn't complete a pass, couldn't do anything right, really, and the Colts ended up losing that game. So it was just, yeah, I would agree, man. Cutting Hoyer makes too much sense, and I think the Colts are definitely going to do that this offseason.
Yeah. And then with Chad Kelly, I mean, I still don't get the people that come out here and say, no, give Kelly the chance. I mean, come on, man. I mean, he was in Denver, he didn't do anything, and he comes to Indy and he puts on some good performances in the preseason, but that's preseason. The guys he was facing then are in the XFL now, playing on Saturdays.
Right.
And the coaches, they're not giving Kelly that full game plan, that full attention. They're not fully scheming for them. I just don't understand where they come at and say Kelly can be the franchise. I mean, I would come out, if I'm Ballard and I clearly break down this film of Jacoby Brissett, I would come out and say, look, maybe even after the draft, if they get a quarterback, and say, look, quarterback position is wide open. Jacoby Brissett, it can be his time. Chad Kelly, it could be his time. Anthony Gordon, Jordan Love, Justin Herbert, Jacob Eason, whoever, it could be their time. The quarterback position is wide open. I would hope that he says that because I just don't know how you stick with Jacoby Brissett and say, hey, you're the starting quarterback after this season of play. I just don't see how you can go to Jacoby Brissett and say that because I think Chris Ballard is probably the most truthful telling general manager in the NFL right now. I mean,
Mm.
I watched some general managers' press conferences and everything, and none of them are to the point truthful like Ballard is. I mean, hell, his end of year press conference was like an hour and 30 minutes. So um, that's my thing on the quarterback position. I wouldn't be mad if we gave Kelly a shot at backup and he ended up winning the backup job. I'm all for giving the guy a chance, but saying he's the franchise, I mean, come on now. We got to see some live game action. We got to see more than what we've been given so far. Moving on here, speaking of Ballard and free agency, this new CBA that's coming out. I
Mhm.
don't I don't understand too much of the numbers, but I did read and I followed up on this that there's a deadline that the Colts, have to spend. And right now, they're $43 million under the CBA rule of money they have to spend. So Chris Ballard has to make up some money this year. He has to. I mean,
Mhm.
that's CBA rule. So how will he make that up? I'm thinking, you extend Ryan Kelly. There's already been a report out their Marlon Mack's extension is coming. I would probably think maybe not yet on Darius Leonard. Usually those extensions come after the third or fourth season because right now Darius Leonard just finished his sophomore year. Who else could be extended? Malik Hooker could be extended.
Mhm.
Quincy Wilson, he needs to show himself. He needs to prove that he deserves to be on this team rather than
Mhm.
get an extension. Um, Maybe you want to give Grover Stewart an extension because he's part of that first draft class. How do you see him making up this money and spending it?
Yeah, for sure. And you already mentioned it a little bit, Michael, about resigning some of your own guys, Marlon Mack. What do you think about Malik Hooker? I know Chris Ballard kind of said, he was okay in 2019. So, how do you feel about Hooker after 3 years? He definitely showed some flashes of brilliance. We saw that, in his rookie season. I believe he had like 3 interceptions in 4 games, and he was just really playing well. And then obviously he got injured and was out for the year. I believe it's an ACL
Yeah, ACL.
injury, blindside block, and so he was out for the year. And then his sophomore year, it was kind of, he didn't start off great because I know he was recovering from that. But I thought he really ended it strong in 2018, and then 2019 was kind of a weird year for Hooker. And um, I don't know. It's just kind of like, how do you feel after 3 years? I don't think he's lived up to that draft stock yet, but I don't necessarily think that he's been a draft bust either. So it's kind of like, how does Chris Ballard, view Hooker and view kind of how he's been after 3 years? And so if I was Chris Ballard, I probably would not extend him yet, just because I don't think he has shown flashes. I don't think he's shown exactly what you want to see out of the number 15th overall pick yet. And so,
And
but
right,
yeah,
and
you
don't.
can go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna do a quick reminder that remember he was a first round draft pick, so you
Mhm.
have that fifth option on him,
Right. Yeah.
fifth year option.
Yeah, exactly. And you could definitely exercise that as well, which I would assume the Colts probably would do. Um, and then, I think in order to spend some of that stuff, you just got to spend more money in free agency. And I think Chris Ballard knows that. I think he knows and understands, that he didn't really give his team a lot of, you know, great pieces to win last year without Andrew Luck. And he's, admitted that. And he's been admittedly frustrated with himself for doing that. And so, he has to spend it one way. I think he can certainly re-sign some of your guys, but I think that he also has to bring in some guys and find a way to spend however much he has to spend it. I think it was like 80%. I don't remember how much it was,
I think it
but
was
he has to spend
89,
it.
I believe.
Yeah, he has to spend a good amount of it. And so I think that he really has no choice. He has to do something with this money. And so yeah, I think that's probably what Ballard will have to do. And once you bring back your own guys, once you kind of re-sign your own, then you can go out and add some pieces, sprinkle in some free agents, some bigger name free agents, especially along the defensive line this year, which is obviously one of your biggest needs. There's a lot of pieces that can help you. And I think that Chris Ballard has to dip into this free agency pool and has to bring in some help from the outside. And I think that's what he'll probably do. And I know that for Colts fans, after after having some really exciting free agency periods where you bring in Frank Gore, Andre Johnson, Trent Cole all in one off season.
Those
Sometimes
weren't
what
even
Chris
all that
Ballard
exciting
does,
to me.
yeah, sometimes what Chris Ballard does is a little bit like, oh, is that it? Is that all you're going to do? This is boring. Free agency is boring, but I think he probably needs to open up his checkbook a little bit more, and he has to. And so I think that he'll probably bring in some other guys, and hopefully he'll bring in some more high profile guys now, knowing that he has to spend that money. And so that's probably what I would say. If I was in Chris Ballard's shoes, that's probably where I would go.
Yeah, I mean, again, a point to Hooker. I would say he hasn't. I would agree with you. He hasn't lived up to that draft potential. But when you look at his stats, and this league is becoming college now, everyone's shattering numbers, everyone's throwing the ball down the field. There were times where Malik Hooker did get beat, but there were also some times where he did not allow anything. He didn't. I mean, look at who the Super Bowl champion quarterback is right now. He didn't really allow Patrick Mahomes to play all over the field. Wait a minute. Malik Hooker didn't even play in that Kansas City game, did he?
No, he didn't. He was injured actually.
Oh my Lord. Okay. I just remember that because as I was just speaking about him, I just remembered. Has Malik Hooker even gone against Patrick Mahomes yet?
No, he hasn't. I
Wow.
believe it was George Odom who filled that role for
George
him.
and Corey Willis.
And Kari Willis, yeah.
Oh, that's so embarrassing.
That's
Godly.
all right. I know
But
it's been a long it was a long season, so it's
yeah,
all good, man. No worries.
but my point is Malik Hooker doesn't allow too much. He had a busted play against DeAndre Hopkins in that crucial Thursday night game. But other than these little things, I mean, I think Malik Hooker has performed good. I won't say well, but I do think he's working himself a good extension, not a big time money extension. But I do want to see what he's got to prove in the fourth year. Hell, maybe he even gets extended during his fourth season next year. Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I want to get your opinion on something because I know we put out this tweet earlier this week about, Colts fans, who would you rather want, Shelby Harris or Chris Jones? Both are two great interior pass rushers. They
Mhm.
play the run well. And we all know Chris Jones is probably going to be demanding more than Shelby Harris. Chris Jones is probably going to be 19 to 20 million. Shelby, I haven't heard too much on his money situation yet, but which way are you looking for if you want to see who makes the biggest impact and who fits the team better between those two?
Yeah, and I mean, it's been reported like the Colts have been interested in Shelby Harris already. This is just my personal preference, and again, Chris Ballard might completely disagree with this, but for me, it's just like, man, why don't you just go get the guy that's proven he can do it time and time again? I mean, Shelby Harris, good player, but I mean, let's just go get the elite guy. Get the guy that's going to
Yeah.
make a difference. And I don't know, admittedly, a lot about Shelby Harris. He could be that guy, but you kind of think of guys, no offense to Danico Autry or anything like that, but he was kind of like a 1B guy. That's kind of what I think of. Not the first wave of free agents. Not when you look at three technique, when you look at defensive tackle, he's not a guy where you're like, oh yeah, he's a for sure a Pro Bowl, perennial Pro Bowl, disruptive force in that defensive line. Granted, he had a good year one in 2018, but I mean, for me, it's just go get the guy, and it might cost a little bit more, but you have the money to do it. You have the resources to do it. Just do it. Just bring in a guy that can can really disrupt that interior, the position that you have been lacking for so long in that three technique. Just some pass rush. Just bring in a guy that's done it and can teach some of these younger guys. And even if you draft a guy, somewhere in the defensive line, wherever it is, I mean, just bring in a guy that's done it and done it at a high level, and now was a Super Bowl champ. I mean, that's always great for your locker room. And so I would say, yeah, for me, I would choose Chris Jones just simply because he's done it, and I feel like he's done it consistently more than Shelby Harris. I don't know a lot about Shelby Harris. It seems like he had a good year last year, but for me, I just want the guy that's done it consistently and is a guy that people know. That's just my opinion. But, again, Chris Ballard's probably his brain's a lot bigger than mine, so he probably knows a lot more than me. But that's the route I would go.
Yeah, man. I think when it comes to Chris Jones, because I thought about this, I actually struggle with this in my head because I'm thinking get a good player for cheaper money
Mhm.
and see what you can get later on. But then I just remembered Chris Ballard has been doing that for 3 years already.
Right.
Now I think it's time to, I'm with you. It's time to get those guys. It is time. Chris Jones is 26 years old. Even if we give him a 5-year contract, he's going to be 31 by the time it's done. And we
Mhm.
would have gotten his prime already.
Right.
And with Danico Autry, look, he had a very good 2018 season, even though he played in like what 9, 10 games and he had 9 sacks.
Yeah.
That's I thought that was pretty good. Now, one thing I really wanted to pay attention to this year was the Nico Autry, because when you perform the way that you did and then you're coming back, you're gonna start gaining more attention,
Mhm.
much more attention. And remember all the buzz the Colts were getting last year. They were getting all kinds of buzz, and that got a lot of people's attention. This year, I noticed Danico Autry was demanding double teams, which did limit his play a little bit in the sacks department. In the run game, I did see a little bit of regression, but he's still, in my mind, a very fine player. And to get Chris Jones, my pipe dream is to get Chris Jones at free agent price, 21 million, 22 million, whatever. I think he's deserved it. I think he's earned it. And then at pick 34, getting Neville Gallimore or Ross Blacklock. That is literally my pipe dream for
Mm.
this year, because when it comes to up that middle, that game against Tennessee, that irked my nerves so much. I
Right.
hate it when I see a guy run over the Colts like Derrick Henry did. And no, that didn't happen all that much this year, but you saw it in games like the Tennessee game, Tennessee, Houston, Tampa Bay. These games, you started to notice there's no pass rush and there's no stopping the run. Even
Mhm.
though the Colts were fairly decent, they started lagging off later in the year. So we need to add premier elite talent on that defensive line. Justin Houston, I love him. He had 10 sacks, but man, he is 31 years old now. We probably are getting the last bit of whatever is left in that tank. Kamiko Toure is coming back from a fractured ankle. I love me some Ben Bandigu. I watched him 2 years at TCU. I know he can do it. Technique has just got to be there.
Mhm.
And that's why when it comes to edge rusher in free agency, I've kind of backed off a little bit about going after Yannick Ngakoue and focusing a little bit more on Vic Beasley. Now, that's just me. I mean, I would kill to be in that room with Chris Ballard and the other scouts. I would love to be in that room and get what they really think about Vic Beasley, because I really don't like the way he was used in Atlanta, because he was used as a coverage linebacker. I mean,
Mm.
this guy needs his hand in the ground coming off the edge. And in my personal opinion, if he came to the Colts, he would be a game changer. He's still only what, 27, 28 years old, something
Uh,
like that.
27. He turns 28 in July.
So he is in the middle of his prime right now,
Mhm.
or just hit it.
Yeah, that's interesting that you said. I did not know that Vic Beasley was used in coverage, because that's interesting, because it kind of reminds me of what the Chiefs did with Justin Houston before he came to Indy. That was a thing where they made him do some coverages and all that stuff, and his sack numbers went down. He got hurt, and then the Colts basically told Justin Houston, "You're just going to rush the passer." And I mean, he played all 16 games of double digit sacks. So that would be really interesting to me. If the Colts just used him primarily like they used Justin Houston, just as a pass rusher, and not in coverage like the Falcons and the Chiefs use those players. And so that's just an interesting thing. I did not know that. Wow.
Yeah, man. I mean, I even in the Super Bowl on that, I think it was the touchdown that sent the game into overtime in the Super Bowl.
Hmm.
Vic Beasley was covering on that play.
Oh
I
wow.
mean, I'm just sitting there thinking, like, now the Falcons, of course, did package him into rushing, but I'm just sitting there thinking, what are you doing? Why is he even running back. I don't get that, but that's my take on Vic Beasley. Now that's just I want him in a Colts uniform. I want him in a Colts uniform. Now getting into our last topic here, we got the combine next week, February 23rd in Indianapolis. Who are some real good scouts that we don't know too much about or we want to get to see a little bit more of? Because, of course, at the Senior Bowl, whoever tweets out videos, that's what we get. But here, we can just go onto the NFL Network and watch it. Who are you mainly looking at?
Yeah, that's a great great question. Um, for players, man, there's I mean, I'm trying to get more into the NFL draft and I'm still not, I've been for people who don't know, I've kind of been feeling under the weather this past week, so I really haven't been doing anything. But I can tell you kind of some of the position groups that I would say I'll be watching because they seem to be position groups that the Colts could really use and position groups that seem pretty deep as far as what I've heard from the draft. And so obviously the wide receiver position could be, really, really big. And depending on what the Colts do at 13, I mean, the dominoes could fall from there. And also depending on what happens in free agency with Amari Cooper and all that stuff. Say the Colts don't do anything with that, I think they should still be really, really watching those wide receiver position because this is one of the deeper wide receiver positions or wide receiver drafts in a long time. And so I think the Colts should be watching a lot of these guys. Is there any guy that like really sticks out to you from these wide receiver positions? Probably not at 13, but one of those guys that the Colts could use in their second round picks. Because I think that's probably where they should go and address that
Yeah.
pick and really address that need in the draft. And so I think a lot of these guys will probably be gone. Some of the bigger names will probably be gone before the Colts pick in the second round. But I don't know. I'm curious. Are there any guys that you think would be potential fits there at one of those second round picks?
I mean, you always want the big name. But me personally, I don't too much focus on the big names. Of course, I study them. Of course, I watch them. Now,
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to the second round, it's not too much of a given that the Colts will take a wide receiver in that one because you got to look at maybe edge rusher, defensive tackle, maybe for sure, and
Mm-hmm.
then tight end, maybe a tackle, maybe a guard. There's so many things that you have to think about. But when it comes to the wide receivers, man, look, man, I'm a TCU guy through and through, man. I love me some Jalen Rager, man. This as a pure athlete, I honestly think he's going to surprise some people. He's going to be added to that group with Jerry Judy, Henry Ruggs. He's going to be added to that group because he didn't. He's coming out as a junior. He didn't get to really go to the Senior Bowl, but man, dude, I love me some Jalen Rager. T. Higgins, he's starting to lose a little bit of traction in the wide receiver group. I would like to think Justin Jefferson would be there at 34, but I'm thinking he's going to the Saints or the Packers because those are teams that do need a slot guy. I'm really fond of Tyler Johnson from Minnesota.
Mm.
He's not the flashy
Yeah.
guy, but man, he just plays football the right way. He's a
Yeah.
sound route runner. Denzel Mims, he shined at the Senior Bowl. Those are some guys I'm looking at. Like really, those are guys.
Yeah, I also like KJ Hamler, a wide receiver from Penn State. He's not the biggest guy; he's more of a speed guy. But you look at even T.Y. Hilton. I mean, when the Colts did not have T.Y. Hilton, it was pretty ugly. I mean, as far as their record and their offense went, I mean, even with Andrew Luck, it was not pretty. And so, I look at a guy like Hamler, probably second to third round pick. So the Colts could draft him with maybe that later second round pick, or even, if they trade up into the second round, which they've been known to do, and snag Hamler. I mean, he's one of the fastest receivers there, probably coming out of the draft. And, in 2019, he had 56 catches, 904 yards, 8 touchdowns. And so, he's just a fast guy, a guy that you can continue to, put the ball in his hands, kind of similar to how the Colts have done with Nyheim Hines and hopefully do with Paris Campbell. I know they wanted to do that last year with Campbell. Just continue to build speed onto that offense, and so I like KJ Hamler a lot. Um, obviously KJ Hill out of Ohio State, another guy, probably second, third round pick. I like him a lot. One thing that I really liked about Hill, and if Derek, my co-host, was here, he'd probably be talking over the moon about him, but he was really, really clutch. Like he had really, really good hands, which I think is something the Colts have lacked outside of T.I. Hilton for so long. Is just a really reliable receiver who's really a really good route runner who can just catch the ball consistently. And so, and also, one thing that he showed was just the idea of making plays, making plays and gaining yards after the catch, which I think the Colts really, really need out of their wide receivers. Did not have a lot of that. I think they were near the bottom is in terms of that last year. And so, that's kind of what I would be looking at. Some of those guys potentially, just guys that last year I kind of had, an idea of like, yeah, I would like this kind of body type. I would like, I'd like a big guy, and then they signed Funchess, and okay, now I want kind of a speedy guy, and they signed Paris Campbell. But this year it's kind of just like, I don't care if he's 6'5", I don't care if he's 5'9". Just sign a guy that can go and make a play. Or draft a guy who can go make a play. And that's just really where I stand right now. It doesn't matter to me the size or the speed. As long as they can go and make plays consistently, I'm down for it.
Yeah, man. Like you said, that size and everything, and I'm gonna go right back to Jalen Rager again. He plays so much bigger than his size. He's like 6 foot or so. And man, he was a triple jump state champion in high school from Waxahachie, Texas. I'm not sure if a lot of people know that, but that just shows you he has hops.
Mm-hmm.
And even when they played SMU in 2017, before the halftime, the last play before halftime, Kenny Hill threw a Hail Mary into the end zone, and Jalen Rager absolutely outjumped the entire SMU secondary and really just outjumped the entire secondary and caught the ball for the touchdown. That's something that I think the Colts really need. I wouldn't say everybody wants that bigger body. I think Zach Pascal can be that bigger body because I think Zach Pascal and Paris Campbell and T.Y. Hilton, those three guys, I do want as Colts next year and for the future. Devin Funchess, I really doubt that he comes back. Chester Rogers, look, Chester Rogers is a good guy. He is a good athlete. He's a good receiver, but we need playmaking, man. We need guys that can get that yak. And I'm with you. KJ Hamler is a speedster guy. I mean, I heard you say, I think the word fast like 3 times, and my PTSD just got me and thought of Ryan Grigson saying,
Oh,
"Oh, Philip Dorsett is so fast."
right, but he can also do other things as well, and you're
Yeah,
not
yeah,
taking him in the first round, so it's a little bit different. But
yeah. But
we would actually use him.
yeah. What about defensive tackles, man? Of course, everybody knows about Derek Brown, Javon Kinlaw, maybe Neville Gallimore. Who are some other defensive tackles that you're looking at? Because I definitely think you got to take a defensive tackle in this draft.
I think you do. And even if you do sign, you do sign a Chris Jones. I mean, let's just think about like as far as the defensive line goes, the Colts are kind of pretty old on the defensive line. I mean, you got Marcus Hunt, Danique Watcher's getting closer to 30. Marcus Hunt are obviously already over 30. And so I think you do got to, just bring a guy in. Obviously, Grover Stewart played pretty well. I thought he had a pretty good season in 2019, but I think you do still need to add some depth in there as well. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm trying to let me pull this up real fast. Sorry about that.
Oh, you're good.
I guess while I'm looking here, Who are some of your guys that you were kind of looking at?
Okay, sound like a broken record, but again, my TCU guys, Ross
Oh yeah.
Blacklock, man. When I saw him in
Ooh.
2017 as a redshirt freshman, man, dude, he was lights out. He was absolutely lights out. Um, I think when you look at him, when you look at, James Lynch is a wild card for me. James Lynch is a wild card for me from Baylor. You look at guys like Raekwon Davis. Maybe Raekwon Davis is a guy who maybe he doesn't fit the Colts better than I thought he would have. Jason Strowbridge, Jordan Elliott, underrated guys who aren't getting too much love. Davon
Mhm.
Hamilton, I like him. But Jordan Elliott is a guy that I really do like. He's 6'4", 315 pounds. I think
Mhm.
he would be a great fit alongside Danico Autry. Hopefully, Chris Jones, Shelby Harris, but Ross Blacklock, Jordan Elliott, Jason Strowbridge from North Carolina. Those are guys that I'm really looking at.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Um, I'm trying to look here at the, more guys that would, because I would think, it really depends, I guess, what the Colts do in free agency. Like it all hinges on that. And so, there's just, yeah, it's really like, it's kind of like a crapshoot at this point until we figure out what the Colts are doing in free agency.
Yeah,
Uh, and so, yeah, I mean, I would say, even like Neville Gallimore out of Oklahoma. I mean, he's a pretty he looked pretty good as far as in the Senior Bowl. I thought he looked pretty good in one on ones.
shined.
Um, he played really well. Very athletic guy. He really is. And the good thing is, a lot of scouts were saying he would fit really well in a 4-3 as that three technique. Who could also play nose tackle, so he's versatile as well, which I think is really really a big thing. You talk about it on the offensive line all the time about guys being versatile. How about that defensive line? That's also really important. Yeah, and I mean Neville Gallimore can, he's compared here. I'm on Walter Football, kind of looking at their drafts. And they compare him to Booger McFarland, who we know well. Obviously played with the Colts there in their Super Bowl run. And also he was compared to Grady Jarrett, a Falcons defensive tackle who is a monster. And so I think any of us would sign up for that if he came anywhere close to Jarrett in terms of play. And so yeah, he's one guy, and you've also, you talked about it a lot. A lot of the other guys as well that I think would be good fits as well. But ultimately, I think the Colts they have to address this defensive line. They just have to do something. Whether that's free agency. I believe that they should do free agency and also draft somebody.
Yep.
But I know a lot of people are saying one or the other. I believe they should do both. And I
Um,
believe they just need to add depth. They need to do what they did. Maybe not to the degree they did when they drafted Quentin Nelson, Braden Smith, but I believe that they need to address this defensive line. Both that, I believe they need to address defensive end, defensive tackle, both defensive tackles. I believe they just need to just overhaul that entire unit and just continue to add youth and continue to add talent to that thing. And I think some of those guys that you mentioned would be great fits.
yeah, and speaking of defensive end, man, I'm looking at defensive ends as well. And I'm trying to find because I don't think we necessarily have to go after that pure edge rusher. I
Mm-hmm.
think a Jabal Sheard type guy because me personally, I wouldn't want to re-sign Jabal Sheard because he's already 30 years old. His legs are already not that fast. He is a great run defender, a great run defender. But when you play that defensive end spot, you got to offer something in the pass game. You have to offer something in the edge rushing department. And I don't think he offers too much. So when I look at defensive ends that could potentially fit the bill for him, I look at a guy like Darrell Taylor from Tennessee, Nick Coe from um, from Auburn, also Marlon Davidson from Auburn. Those are like the three main guys that I look at that can defend the the run much better. So
Yeah.
that's where I'm at when it comes to the defensive end part.
Yeah, just getting guys that are more all around players as opposed to just natural pass rushers. Yeah, like you said, more of the Jabal Sheards as opposed to the Kamoko Tourés. Kamoko Touré, obviously, we would say is probably at this point in his career and projected probably as going to be a better pass rusher in his career than Jabal Sheard ever will be. But I would say Jabal Sheard could potentially, be a better player overall because he's such a good run defender. And so that would be something that I would, if you didn't for some reason bring back Jabal Sheard, which I think the Colts really like Jabal Sheard a lot. But if you didn't bring back Jabal Sheard, I would definitely say you find a guy like Jabal Sheard, just a younger version of Sheard, because you need to stop the run. Let's be real. You need to stop the run. And we saw what happened when Jabal Sheard came back. The Colts' run defense got a lot better. And so I think that's what you got to do. If you do let Sheard walk, but I think the Colts have a lot of holes already to fill, a lot of positions to fill. And so, but yeah, if you do, there's some guys that you could get potentially rounds, the couple second, third round, some of those guys that you mentioned, maybe even fourth round. Maybe, you never know how the draft falls. Some guys slide completely. So I would definitely agree with that, Michael. I think, yeah, you should look at to do that if you don't bring back Sheard.
Yeah, man. And this mock draft that I put out, I believe it was earlier today. I think for the draft, I think the draft should be offensive heavy because all things considered, we went defensive heavy last year. I think this year should be offensive heavy, and those three picks out of the 9 I believe the Colts have this year, 3 out of those 9 were 2 defensive tackles, 1 defensive end. And then the rest was quarterback, 2 wide receivers, tight end, running back, and a tackle. And now some people might, be surprised when they hear me say running back. Yes, running back. Because look, Marlon Mack is running back number 1. Let's just go ahead and point that out now. He's going to be getting a contract extension, so obviously. But when I look at this draft class, I see 2 guys. We need a bell cow. We need a guy when it comes time in the fourth quarter and we have a 10-point lead or even a touchdown lead. We need a guy that can wear and tear a defensive line down. And 2 big running backs that I know in this draft that can be there at the 6th round from Memphis, Patrick Taylor Jr., and man, there's a lot of them in this draft, but another guy from TCU, Shewo Alanalua. Patrick Taylor, I believe, is 6'3, no, 6'2, 220 pounds. Shewo Alanalua, 6'3, 235 pounds, I believe. Those
Wow.
guys being the cowbell, yeah, dude. Like, if you want to look up Shewo Alanalua, just look at how much of an athlete he is. I mean,
Hmm.
he squats about 700 pounds. He's pretty strong, man. He is really strong, and I think that's an element that this Colts offense is missing. Marlon Mack. You know, we love him, but sometimes he can be a little fragile. Um, and I think we need a bell cow when it comes to the fourth quarter. They just go and go and go, put their shoulder down, put all of 235 pounds on a linebacker. That's
Hmm.
what I think. And back to my original point about the draft being offensive heavy, I think that's what this team is missing right now because you saw the defense for most of the season, except for like the last 5 or 4 games. The defense was getting after it. The defense was creating opportunities. The defense was, making it a game. But this offense is suspect. So that's why I think this draft should center around the offense. Get you a wide receiver, a premier wide receiver, and then maybe in the 6th or 7th round, get you a Benjamin Victor. Maybe he's there. Um, so that's where I'm at with tight ends. Where are you at with tight end, Cody? Because I know everybody who lives in Indiana. I'm from Texas and I know about them, but guys in Indiana, they might say Cole Kmet or Bryson Hopkins.
Mhm.
Uh, I really like Hunter Bryant. I think he fits that Eric Ebron mold of an athletic tight end with
Yeah.
better hands, obviously. And I really just want to ask you where you're at with the tight end position.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Colts certainly, if they don't address it in free agency, which there's some players they could get in free agency, potentially, an Austin Hooper and Hunter Henry, which that could potentially just solve that problem right there. But like you said, Cole Kmet, he's a beast. I'm a Notre Dame fan, so he's uh he's a guy that I think would be really well. He's big. He could be a full time starter. Um, it was kind of cool to see him just the giant jump in production that he had in 1 year compared, from sophomore year then to his junior year. He really showed up, and so I think that he could be a really good fit. And I even I don't know how much you feel about Thaddeus Moss, but I think he's a guy that is just a mismatch type of guy. He's kind of like the weapon type guy, like the Ebron type guy that you have to scheme for. And so I think that could potentially be a guy that you could draft. But with some of these guys, you'd probably have to draft them, second round or so. I would personally, if I was Chris Ballard, I think that um, if you don't sign a tight end in free agency, I would probably wait till third, fourth round to probably draft a tight end because obviously quarterback, I believe the quarterback, defensive line, wide receiver are bigger needs for me in my mind. And again, Chris Ballard knows more than me, but in my mind, that's probably where I would go. I would probably try to find a guy, in those type of rounds, but I would probably try to find, a good complement to Jack Doyle. So whether, probably a guy that's more athletically gifted, a guy that can go make the big play, a guy that can have double digit touchdowns potentially. That kind of guy.
Yeah.
That's the type of guy that I would want personally. Just more of a receiving threat because Jack Doyle, as good as he has been, I mean he's limited. He can't go up there and command double teams and go make a contested catch. I mean, it's just not who he is. It's not the type
Yeah.
of player that he is. And I think that that's what the Colts offense would be missing in terms of their tight ends. I think they have, Jack Doyle is good, solid receiver, good run blocker. Mo Ali Cox, he's good run blocker as well. But I think the Colts could use, just a good receiving threat. And I think if they do that, their tight end position will be set for a long time.
Yeah, man. I compared Jack Doyle to damn near Jason Witten. I mean, you just notice how reliable he is on third down. He's a good blocker. Now, if Jack Doyle can have the career Jason Witten has had, then we have a pretty great player on our hands. And you
Yeah.
mentioned Thaddeus Moss. I mean, we didn't get to see too much of Thaddeus Moss because, we got to see a lot of Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson at LSU.
Right.
But Thaddeus Moss is definitely a wild card. You look at Jared Pinkney from Vanderbilt, Albert O. I do not know how to say that last name, so I'm not going to even attempt it. But I'm going to say Albert O from Missouri, who I
Yeah.
think is another Hunter Bryant, Bryant type tight end who I think would be great in the 4th round because the tight end depth in this draft is great. I mean,
It is.
it is the deepest I've seen in quite a while. So, if you want those really good tight ends, I think it starts with Bryson Hopkins, ends with Albert O. And if you want those third string guys, a Mitchell Wilcox, a Jacob Breeland, I'm not too high on those guys. I think you can also go there as well.
Mhm.
That's why I think you don't go tight end in free agency because Hunter Henry, that injury history scares me, and Austin Hooper, I'm pretty sure the Falcons are going to franchise tag him. So those two guys, I don't really think too much of. Now that's the tight end position. I mean, speaking of the tight end position, I'll say this about Bryson Hopkins. I think he's the most polished route runner in this draft class for tight ends.
Hmm.
I think that because watching his film, I'm just like, wow, he's basically a wide receiver.
Wow.
He is
Yeah.
such a polished route runner. And back to what we were talking about with Jabal Sheard, and then we'll get back on track because I completely forgot to mention this. And the fact that you said you're a Notre Dame fan actually reminded me of it. When I'm looking at a guy to become a better Jabal Sheard, how about Khalid Kareem?
Yeah. I mean, that would be, I mean, that would be a pretty good fit. I mean, I think that, he's a solid player all the way around. Um, I think that he could potentially be, a good fit for the Colts. And I mean, he's not going to come super early. Third, he's projected, maybe third, fourth round, maybe even fifth round. I don't know, maybe one of those things. But uh, the good thing is he's not a flashy player like Sheard. He's not going to give you double digit sacks. But the thing is, he's tough. He's exactly what you want as
Yep.
far as a defensive lineman. He's solid and he's going to make plays. It may not always be the strip sacks. It may not always be the double digit sacks, but he's gonna make plays and he's gonna be there and he's gonna lead by example. That's a lot of what Sheard does. He's not a big talker, but he's just in there consistently and lets his play do a lot of the talking. And so I think the same thing is true of Kareem. He's 265. So he's pretty solid. He's probably around what Jabal Sheard is now. So I think that could potentially be a really good fit, in one of those rounds. And so it all hinges on what the Colts do with Sheard. I mean, the Colts could the Colts could keep Sheard and we could push this off another year. Who knows? But yeah, I mean, if they do let him go, I think Kareem is definitely a really good fit.
Yeah, man. I stumbled across Khalid Kareem, and he's definitely one of my favorite defensive ends, along with
Mhm.
Bradley Anay, those guys. Now, getting back on track here, switching to the offensive tackle position, because regardless if Anthony Costanzo comes back or not, I think you need to take a tackle in this draft. Now, it hinges on his decision whether to come back or not, whether you're going to take one in the first or second round opposed to the fifth and sixth round.
Right.
So, who are some guys that you like for the left tackle position?
Yeah. Are you talking if he does come back or if he doesn't?
Let's do both.
Okay, so if he doesn't come back, I think that pushes that up probably to the first round, honestly. Um, and, you obviously have Andrew Thomas, Georgia, probably the best offensive tackle, probably top 10 pick. So I think that he would be sitting there probably pretty close to when the Colts pick. Colts are at 13. So if some if there's a run made at some quarterbacks, the Colts could potentially, Thomas could potentially slide there to the Colts. Um, he was really, really good. And unfortunately, as a Notre Dame fan, I watched him take on the Notre Dame defenders on that crushing game. He was just fantastic, and he's just a guy that I think would be really good for the Colts. And I wish selfishly that the Colts could just take him, regardless of if Costanzo was there or not. But they have other things, other needs as well that are probably bigger if Costanzo indeed does stay. But if he does indeed go, then I think yeah, he's one of the guys. Mekhi Becton as well from Louisville. I thought that he's huge, obviously. I mean, he's 6'7", 369, so he's big and he actually moves really well for how big he is.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I think that he could use some fine tuning for sure in terms of pass blocking, but I think that's all stuff that's teachable. And I think that he'll probably have to cut a little bit of weight, but I think he could potentially be a good fit for the Colts there. Um, but we'll see. We'll see what happens there. There's a lot of offensive tackles that I think the Colts could take. Do you have any guys that you would probably like to see? Say Costanzo is retiring, the worst happens. Um,
Um,
what would you say? Are there any guys that I didn't touch on that you would like to see?
I think okay, so if Anthony Costanzo does not come back, I think you still have to take a quarterback at number 13. I
Okay.
mean, left tackle is important. It's the quarterback's blind side, but you got to have a quarterback to protect. So
Right.
I think you got to still stick with the game plan, go quarterback at 13. Now, when we look at pick number 34 or 44, now we're getting busy. Now I'm looking at a Josh Jones. Now I'm looking at a Austin Jackson. Maybe in the third round, if you just can't pass up on a defensive tackle or wide receiver or tight end, you can look at Ezra Cleveland out of Boise State in the third round. A guy that I do like that has surprised a little bit is from Texas Tech, Terrence Steele. He had a good showing at the Senior Bowl. He went up against some good edge rushers. He showed some good stuff in passing, and he was projected as a seventh round pick. Now he's projected as like a fifth round pick. He's a guy that I think that the Colts could possibly take a chance on.
Hmm.
These guys like Tristan Wirfs, Jarek Willis, these guys, they're going to be off the board by the time the Colts pick at 13. But with another guy, Trey Adams from Washington, there's been talk about some technique work going on with him. I think he has the potential to be a great tight end in the NFL. That's just my opinion. He has good footwork. The technique is needs a little bit of work, but that's why you hire an offensive line coach. That's why you got Frank Reich as your coach. Those are guys that I'm looking at when it comes to the tackle position.
Hmm.
Because, like I said, I'll say it again, regardless if Anthony Costanzo comes back or he does not, you got to get a guy in there, just like the Eagles did last year. You got Jason Peters, but bring in a guy like a Andre Dillard and let him learn from Jason Peters.
Hmm.
I think best case scenario, Anthony Costanzo comes back and the Colts can get Trey Adams, Ezra Cleveland. Hell, maybe if they even want to draft early, get Josh Jones, get Austin Jackson, get these guys. Um, when it comes to right tackle, I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
Braden Smith, I think he's solid there.
Hmm.
It's just really. Let me ask you this, Cody. What do you think of Mark Glowinski as a trade piece?
I guess the question would be, what do people actually see like in terms of value for him?
Yeah.
I honestly don't know how much of a trade market there is for him, but again, if you do that, then you got to figure out what we're going to do, what you're going to do at right guard. And he did just re-sign Golinsky, so I don't know how much of a if you would have much of a cap hit there. Um, but I think that would potentially be a good thing. I thought that overall, Golinsky was undoubtedly the weakest link to the offensive line. Um, and I think that the Colts should definitely at some point look to upgrade from him. Um, yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's something where you can win with him. It's not something where he's not awful, but he's not good.
Yeah.
And I think that but I don't know. I'm kind of like torn. I guess I never really thought about what actually people would think about Mark Glowinski if you offered him in a trade. I don't
See,
know
when
what
I
people would actually give you.
I think if the Colts offered him, I think you could get a fifth rounder for him. I think you
And
can. And even in this draft class, considering how deep it is, a fifth rounder is pretty good. It's good position. Now, when I studied the Colts run game in January, the problem with Glowinski was when you go north to south, he can be very solid in the run game. But when you're asking him to go east to west, he got beat quite a bit of times, which is why when you watch the season, when Marlon Mack went zone right, zone left, toss right, toss left, he got beat for a loss of 2, a loss of 3, got back to the line of scrimmage. I mean, you even heard Frank Reich talk about it. The run game is 9 yards, 7 yards, loss of 3, loss of 1, 3 yards, inconsistent work. And I
Mhm.
think that had to do with Glowinski going from east to west. Now, I don't doubt that he can get better this offseason. I certainly do, because that would take a need right off the board. I'm definitely open to giving him another chance.
Mhm.
So that's where I'm at with the offensive line. Ryan Kelly, he's your guy. Braden Smith, he's your guy. I mean, what a great pick that was from Chris Ballard, man. That was a sneaky good pick. Quentin Nelson, those guys, they're right there. Left tackle and right guard. Well, I would probably say more so left tackle right now is a bit of a question right now, but I mean, there's so many needs on this team. We're talking about all of them tonight, and man, I love talking about this, man. I love talking about this.
Yeah.
So that's where we're at with the left tackle and possibly Mark Lewinsky.
Mhm. Yeah.
All right, man. So do you have anything else you wanna bring up or talk about?
Well, we've been talking for a while, so people, I don't know. Hopefully, people haven't tuned out by now. It's been a longer podcast, but it's been good, man. I've enjoyed it. A lot of draft talk, a lot of people. Sorry for some people if I didn't have the most insightful things to say as far as the draft is. Michael, I know you're a lot more into the draft than I am. You're a big draft guru guy, so tried to give my opinion on some of the guys that I kind of knew. But ultimately, man, I think that there's a lot of positions that the Colts have to address, free agency and in the draft, and it's going to be interesting to see how they go about addressing them because free agency is coming quickly, man. The draft's coming quicker, so I'm excited for that. And like you said, the combines, I believe this weekend, either this weekend or next weekend.
I think it
It's at
starts
the
on
end of
Monday, I believe. I think the
It's
23rd.
a Monday. Okay, I knew it was on prime time, which is interesting. Um, so that'll be interesting to watch. But man, it seems like every year the free agency and draft just kind of creep up on you. Like holy smokes, those are coming quick. So I'm excited for 'em, man. It's my favorite. One of my favorite things throughout the year is the draft. Able to just kind of chill for a couple days and just finally see an end to all those dreaded mock drafts and see what the Colts are actually doing. It's a lot of fun, man.
I know, man. I can't wait to finally take a break from, I'm watching free agent highlights, potential free agents. I'm watching nothing but draft guys, getting my draft board together and everything. And now I get to sit down for a couple of days and just watch the combine. That's what I get to do. Uh yeah, like you said, it's been a good podcast so far. So if we don't have anything left, man, we're gonna be back next week
Yeah.
to recap this crazy combine that's supposed to be going on starting on Sunday, I believe. I mean Sunday, that's most likely that's where players just get weighed in. That's where they get maybe workouts in, nothing really on field stuff. So interviews. That's really it on Sunday when the combine
Mm.
starts. So next week we'll be back with hopefully a recap of the NFL Combine. So,
Yes,
last,
sir.
lastly, you got anything else, Cody?
No, man. Well, I'm hoping I feel better for next week's podcast. I apologize if it sounds like I'm sick. I am sick. So hopefully I tried to do my best, tried to bring the best insight I could. And I know you always bring good
Definitely,
insight, man. So hoping to get a little bit better and can't wait for next week.
definitely, man. Well, I sure hope you do get better, dude, because
Thank
we need you, man.
you. Thank you.
All right. Well, He is Cody Felger. I am Michael Terrazas. We will be back next week with another edition of the Colts Brawl. Y'all have a blessed weekend, guys.